Good afternoon, friends. I will be sharing some of my favorite Christmas tales today. And since I am fond of children's stories, I thought we would start with two of them. Here is Candles in the Window of Quaker Christmas. John was a young Quaker lad during the Civil War, a bad time to be a Quaker. For back then they dressed and talked oddly, saying thee and thou, but worst of all, they wouldn't fight in the war. Many hated them, for their sons, brothers, and husbands were off fighting and dying, while Quaker loved ones were home, safe and sound. Sometimes John wished he wasn't a Quaker, but then he remembered God sees the heart, so he would tell God he was sorry. Still, it was hard. There goes the sissy, wanna fight? Then as John walked on, others catcalled, come on, why don't you fight, scaredy cat? This went on day after day. If he told Mom and Dad, they'd gently say, thee must forgive for Christ's sake. Somehow, John's forgiveness always came unglued. Once John talked to his dad about why Quakers didn't fight. After showing him biblical reasons, his dad said, we needn't be ashamed. People forget that while their men are fighting, we grow the food that feeds everyone. We repair the roofs of the widows and plow their fields. Don't let anyone make you ashamed of being a Quaker. That helped John, till Big Ed beat him. Big Ed was John's chief tormentor. He had many ways of making life miserable. Bang! A rock slammed into John's head, or as he walked down the aisle, a foot slipped out, and slam! Down he went on the floor while the whole class tittered. Or on the way home, whoops, all of John's books landed in the mud. John's greatest comfort was Grandma. She lived with the family and helped in many ways, but what John loved most was she always knew when he felt down. She would gently say, come, have a piece of peach pie right out of the oven. Then, while eating, he and Grandma visited, and somehow that always made him feel better. It was Christmas time, and you'd think things were easier, but no, things got worse. You see, the Quakers didn't observe holidays. They thought every day was a holy day, the original meaning of holiday. So John was teased about that. John noticed something interesting every Christmas. Grandma baked enough for an army, yet there was always the same amount for the family. Where did all the rest go? John had been too shy to ask, but this Christmas he was getting to the bottom of the mystery. One day, while Grandma was making cinnamon rolls, John said, Grandma, where do all these rolls go? Grandma looked at him thoughtfully and said, every Christmas I bake for the poor, the ill, and those who have lost loved ones in the war. It's my way of honoring Jesus. Then with a twinkle in her eye, she said, how about helping me deliver the packages? John was delighted, but asked, how dost thee know when a soldier has died? John, she said, haven't thee noticed the candles in the windows? They light them for dead soldiers. After that, John noticed the candles. It made him sad, so he began praying when he saw them. And that was the beginning of John's very special Christmas. Christmas Day was blustery with snow that stung. At first, John didn't mind pulling the sled, but after a while he was tired and cold. Grandma slipped him a cinnamon roll, and that helped. Finally, they came to the last house. Grandma said with an odd smile, "How wouldst thee like to deliver this package?" John gladly took the package and knocked. When the door opened, John was speechless. There stood Big Ed. He was speechless too. Finally, John awkwardly handed him the package and murmured, "Merry Christmas," and fled. "Grandma," John said, "why did we bring a package to Big Ed's house?" "Didn't thee know?" Grandma said quietly. "His father died in the war a few months ago. Ed is the oldest son and works hard to help his mother." Suddenly, it fit. Ed's taunts about being afraid to fight. True forgiveness welled up in John's heart, and a lump of concrete disappeared. Plus, John received another Christmas gift. Ed stopped tormenting him and stood up for him when the other kids were mean. Now we come to a very different story, and it is laid in old Poland. The title is On Clean Hay. In a village near Krakow was Pan John's farmhouse. All day it was busy, but then at nightfall the lamp was lit and the newspaper was read by Antek, the oldest boy who went to high school. He read, "Tomorrow, the day before Christmas, a famous performer will give his Christmas puppet show at the Falcon Hall. His wife will sing hymns." Antek put the paper down and said, "Our puppet show is ready." Father quickly added, "Don't stay out too late." "No, we will give our show several times between 5 and 7 o'clock and start home," replied Antek. In one corner of the room stood a two-towered miniature church puppet show. Between the towers, the doors opened to reveal a stage. On it were wooden figures in bright costumes that the mother had made. In the background was the figure of a woman with a baby in her arms. The father had helped the boys in building the theater. Many families made them and took them to the city streets and performed the nativity story on Christmas Eve. After the theater was set up, Antek would crawl underneath and work the puppets from sticks that went through a slot in the floor. The mother set down the soup and said, "Tomorrow is the puppet show." "Yes, and we will make a lot of money," Stefan, the second oldest boy, crowed. "And what will you do with the money?" the mother said with a smile. At that, a babble of voices arose. Antek wanted a book, Stefan tools, Christopher, who played the violin, needed new strings, and Anusia, age 10, wanted shoes. The family were ambitious farmers. They wanted Antek to go to the university, Stefan to the School of Commerce, and Christopher to the Academy of Music. The mother privately thought that Anusia might make a great singer with training. They would see what God would do. Meanwhile, they would work and save. The day before Christmas was bright and clear. Antek had the theater on his back. Stefan, who read the lines, followed with the sticks on which the theater stood. Next came Christopher carrying his violin, and then Anusia, who sang the songs, tagged behind. They met others on their way, calling the old greeting, "May Jesus Christ be praised." They entered the city, and just as they had set up the theater, disaster struck. There was a big crowd, and the children were thrilled until a man wearing a star ordered them to stop. Stefan shrieked, "We can't! The show must go on!" He was just reading the lines. The important-looking man demanded, "Where is your license?" "What license?" Antic said. "We've never had a license." "Well, things are different this year," the man said, not unkindly. "Now you must have a license." "How much is it?" said Stefan, the practical one. 100 zlotys, the man said. "We don't have 100 zlotys," Antic groaned. "I'm sorry," the man said, "but you will have to stop." He really did sound sorry. "We may as well go home," Antic said sadly. Anusia started to cry. "No," replied Stefan. "Let's go to a side street and start over." Antic would have none of it. They didn't want to be arrested. As the children started walking slowly, two men came by talking earnestly. They didn't notice the group and almost mowed them down. "What have we here?" the first man cried. "Is it a puppet show?" Antic wondered why he was so surprised. Puppet theaters were common. The second man said, "Do you put on the show? Do you do a good job?" "Yes, sir," said Antic proudly. "We do a very good job. We've been doing it for years." Well, it seemed like years. It was really only 3. "Come with us," the first man said happily. "We had a famous puppet theater that was to perform at the Falcon Hall, but Pan Kowalski and his wife didn't appear. You are an answer from heaven." The children followed the men as if in a dream and quickly set up their puppet show. If the audience was disappointed, they didn't show it. They loved the children and showered them with money. When it was over, Antic counted 500 zlotys. The children couldn't believe their eyes. They were happy as they hurried home. They stopped to ask a farm wife for some milk. She said, "Oh, come in and have some soup. It'll warm you up." After they had eaten, the farmer said, "Come with me to the barn. I have something to show you." The children wondered what could be so interesting. "It is Pan Kowalski and his wife. They were to put on a puppet show at the Falcon Hall, but they couldn't because the wife had her baby in our barn. There wasn't room in the house, and it's warmer here. We have a heater for the animals." As they entered the barn, the children saw the woman lying on the hay with the baby in her arms. Stefan murmured, "It's like the Christ child." At that, the children fell to their knees. The farmer said in an undertone, "I don't know what Pan Kowalski will do. They were counting on that money. It's what they live on. God knows I'll let them stay with us." The children looked at each other oddly. "And it's the night when Christ was born," Antic said. But Stefan said, "I know what you're going to say. Hand me the money." He quickly took the money and, slipping into the barn, placed the 500 zlotys in the manger. Then he knelt and prayed. It was a richer and happier group of children that hurried home that Christmas Eve. Now we come to my very favorite Christmas story. You may have heard me read it before. I think it's an old Russian legend because I've seen many versions under different titles. I call mine The Cobbler's Guest. In an old Russian town lived a cobbler named Martin. His home was a small basement room. Through its window, he saw the feet of passers-by. He knew their boots, for he had worked on most of them. Martin had loved God, but tragedy struck. First, his wife died, leaving him a small son. Then, the boy got sick and died. That was too much for Martin. He turned his back on God and became a very bitter man. One day, an old man came to have his shoes repaired. His saintly manner touched Martin. Soon he was telling the old man all his troubles, and ended by saying, "All I want is to die." The old man gently said, "We have no right to judge God. If he willed your son to die and you to live, he had his reasons. You despair because you live only for yourself." Well, what else is there to live for, Martin wondered. You could live for God. How does one live for God? The life and words of Christ show us how, and the Gospels point the way. The man's words gripped Martin. That day he went out and bought a copy of the Gospels and began to read them. At first he read on holidays, but the life of Christ fascinated him, and soon he was reading until his lamp oil ran out. Martin's life began to change. He became a much happier man. Once at Christmas time, Martin read about the sinful woman who anointed Jesus' feet with oil and wiped them with her hair. He was sorry that the Pharisee didn't give Christ any water for washing, and thought, he's thinking of himself, like me. I wonder what I would do if Christ came to visit me. At that, he fell asleep. "Martin," a voice whispered, "look into the street tomorrow. I shall come to visit you." Martin woke up. He looked around, nobody there. He looked down the street, nobody there. Was it a dream? At that, he fell asleep. Next morning, after praying, he fixed some soup and porridge. Then he lit his samovar, put on his apron, and began to work. As he worked, he wondered, was that a dream or not? Well, I'm going to look at all the feet of passers-by. Soon he was looking out his window and saw Stepan, the street sweeper, who looked tired. I'll call him in and give him tea, he thought. So he opened the door. Come in, you look half frozen." "God bless you. Oh, my bones were aching," Stepan said as he stamped the snow off his boots. "Don't bother with your boots," Martin said. "I wipe the floor many times a day." They sat at the table while Martin poured tea. Stepan quickly emptied his and started to thank Martin, who saw that he would enjoy more. So he poured another tumblerful. As they drank, Martin peered out the window. "Are you looking for somebody?" Stepan asked. So Martin told him about the voice and said, "You've heard of Christ, haven't you?" Yes, I've heard," Stepan said, "but I can't read." So Martin told Stepan what he'd read, and then added, "So I have been looking for the Lord today." Then Martin told him that the Lord blessed the poor and humble. Tears ran down Stepan's cheeks. As he left, he said, "You have comforted my body and my soul." Martin went back to stitching and kept glancing out the window. Later he rose to look at some peasant shoes. A girl in a thin dress was wearing them and trying to shield her baby from the snow. Martin quickly opened the door and said, "Come in, dear, you and baby, and get warm." The girl was surprised to see an old man with glasses on the end of his nose, but he looked kind, so she followed him. Martin said, "Sit on the bed, feed your baby." But she said sadly, "I can't. I haven't had anything to eat or drink since early this morning." Martin quickly gave her soup, a bowl of porridge, and a tumbler of tea. Then he said, "Hand me the child, I've had a baby." Soon the baby was playing happily while the girl told her tale. Recently, she had not received any money from her husband in the army, and she couldn't find any work. When she rose to leave, Martin gave her his old cloak, and as she was going out the door, he handed her some money. The girl wept and said, "It must have been the Lord himself that made you look out the window and see me." After she had left, Martin ate some soup and started working, but kept looking out the window. No one special came till he saw the apple woman. She had set down her basket of apples and her sack of fuel chips. Suddenly, a boy snatched an apple, but she was quick. She grabbed him. "Wait till the officers get here," she said. Martin left the shop and quickly separated them. He took the boy by the hand and turning to the woman said, "Oh, let him go, Granny. For the Lord's sake, please forgive him." "I'll make him sorry," she yelled. "It's something he will never forget." Martin kept begging until she said the boy could go. He tried to run, but Martin held him. "Now ask forgiveness and don't steal again." The boy cried and begged forgiveness, but Granny kept fuming. "Oh, Granny, vengeance is our way, but not God's. If the police should beat him for an apple, what punishment do we deserve?" At that, the woman was silent. So he told the parable of the servant who was forgiven his debt, but seized his own debtor by the throat. Martin ended saying, "God demands forgiveness, or he will not forgive us. Forgive all, but especially this heedless youngster." Finally, the old woman said, "It's just his childishness, God help him," as she picked up her things. The boy jumped up saying, "Let me carry something for you, Granny. I'm going the same way you are." Martin watched till they disappeared from sight, then went back to his basement. It was dusk, and he sadly thought, the Lord never came. Martin took his Bible down, and he was wanting to read where he had left off, but it opened at a different spot. Then he heard a sound of feet, and a voice said, "Martin, don't you know me?" "Who is it?" Martin cried. The voice replied, "It is I." And from a corner out came Stephen, who then vanished like a cloud. "It is I," the voice repeated. And from another corner came the girl with the baby and vanished. "It is I." And the apple woman came and vanished. Martin's soul was glad as he read the passage in the Bible. "I was hungered, and he gave me meat. I was thirsty, and he gave me drink. I was a stranger, and he took me in." I thought we would end tonight with a true story. It also happened in Russia, but quite a few years later. I call it the gift. In old Russia, during the reign of Catherine the Great, the largely uninhabited regions of the Ukraine were offered to the persecuted German Mennonites. There was a huge migration. The Mennonites lived in peace, for the most part, with just a few brief pogroms, until the Great Pogrom of 1911. Then homesteads were burned, women and children abused, and men disappeared, never to be seen again. In the midst of this turmoil, the Krause family was preparing to celebrate Christmas, though the pogrom had reached the nearest village. The four Krause brothers wanted to give their mother something special. The oldest brothers were delegated to go shopping. It didn't take them long to find the right gift, a revolving Christmas tree holder that played Silent Night. They could hardly wait to give it to their mother. On Christmas Eve, the family read the nativity story from the Bible and then sat and watched the Christmas tree revolve and play Silent Night. Into this peaceful scene came a banging at the door, which was flung open, and thugs came in with guns pointed at the family. The Krauses prepared to meet God. But strangely, the thugs stood silently as though rooted to the floor, and then turned and left quietly. What had changed them from being bent on murder and mayhem? Was it the sight of the family quietly celebrating Jesus' birth with an open Bible? Or the revolving Christmas tree holder playing Silent Night? Or did God send his angels to protect them? Russia expelled all the Mennonites. They were packed tightly in trains so that they could only take the clothing on their backs. However, the Krauses were determined to take the revolving Christmas tree holder. So they tied it underneath the train and retrieved it when they arrived in Latvia. Like many of those Mennonites, the Krauses settled in Canada. Through the generations, the story of how God saved them has been told. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody.